All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Wes Salisbury with Costerisan. Chances are some of you might already know me pretty well. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a consultant in our Sage Intacct, our Sage Intacct technology practice. But what's interesting about today's webinar is going to be a little bit of a deviation from my normal webinars. Essentially, one of the things I like to dig into, if you know me pretty well, is I like to be very technical, very live demo-like on these type of presentations. But today's presentation is going to be more high-level, conceptual, more future-looking type of vision. So seeing it as it is the beginning of the decade, I wanted to get the cliche reference of 2020 vision out of the way early so that I don't have to use it again for the rest of the year. So the title of this presentation today is Using Smart Technologies and Using Technology Smartly. So part of the theme of this presentation is, and really a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is from the perspective of, well, essentially, I just got done attending, or I shouldn't say I just got done. I attended Sage Intacct's Advantage Conference in Las Vegas in October of last year, and kind of ending that decade with an idea of all the different functionalities that are currently released or in the process of getting released. It's really interesting to see how machine learning and artificial intelligence is being woven into all of these products versus those same products 4 or 5 years ago. So pretty much this presentation is going to be more talking about first of all, how machine learning and artificial intelligence can enhance your organization's efficiency, but we also have some other not necessarily artificial intelligence tools that you can employ to help achieve the same ends. So since artificial intelligence and machine learning or part of that topic is the conversation about humans versus machines. How do humans stack up against machines? And what are humans good at that machines aren't necessarily good at, and vice versa? Well, for starters, and once again, this isn't an exhaustive list. I'm sure I could spend, I'm sure many people throughout the years have come up with larger lists than this, but I just have a small listing for each here. But humans overall excel in negotiating and working with other people, managing relationships. It's really I'm sure it's very difficult to try to have a machine try to manage a business relationship of any kind. And humans also excel in having intuition and also leading. So humans overall are a lot better at thinking on their feet, reading people, being more intuitive to new things that get passed their way. But on the other hand, what machines excel in are calculating and raw data processing. Computers, their main purpose is to compute. And computers for many years have had greater computational abilities than humans really ever have had. And machines also excel in repetition as well as following. So just a little bit of background on myself. One of the jobs that I've worked in my past was at a manufacturing organization that created auto parts. And as part of that process, they used these water jet robots, these cutting robots that cut into the material according to a blueprint, according to dimensions, and created these parts with really good precision. And once again, it was repetitive, so they could put out tons and tons and tons of these duplicate parts at very closely to what the manufacturer or what the client was expecting. But what machines really aren't good at, kind of going back to the intuition side of things, is machines are really good at taking something that they already know and just repeating it with maximum efficiency. Humans can do that too, but the downfall with humans is that they can typically be doing better things than doing the same thing over and over and over again, because like on the previous slide, humans are better at intuition and relationship management and value add activities like that. And value add activities, that's the word I wanted to, or that's the set of words I wanted to make sure that we gave proper focus for in this presentation. So what's happening in the 2020s? Well, just to back up a few years, when you look back into the middle of the 20-teens, artificial intelligence and machine learning were around. They were around, and really they were just buzzwords. They were just buzzwords. You might have had a handful of big players in the business or in technology where they really had live artificial intelligence and machine learning and stuff like that. But what's different about the 2020s, now that we're rolling into the new decade, is that a majority of software vendors and tech vendors are not only just heavily investing in machine learning and artificial intelligence, but their solutions either heavily use them or are very, very close to deploying them at large scale. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, and going back to what I learned at Advantage, there were dozens, maybe even over 100 different tech vendors there, and I walked up to their booths, and every part of their conversation, with every conversation I had with them, there was something about how their solution is using machine learning or artificial intelligence to help automate some of the manual processes that people currently use to get the job done. So I pretty much just summarized everything, all of my little points here with the preceding sentences. But overall, the 2020s, artificial intelligence and machine learning and robotic process automation are big deals in the new decade, and they're no longer just buzzwords. And ultimately, the reason why you'd want to think about having your organization deploy these tools is it gives more time for value add activities versus just straight up processing of data. Okay, so I just wanted to dig into a couple more details when it comes to what actually constitutes value add activities. Now, once again, you could come up with a massive list of value add activities that you and your staffers could be doing to help add value to your organization, but that would take up many, many pages and would probably make us run out of time. But just a few that I identified are vendor and customer relationship management, for starters. So let's say if you had more time, if your staffers had more time to work with your vendors and your customers, you could negotiate better payment terms. Like maybe instead of having net 30 on your AP payments to a vendor, you could negotiate, hey, maybe could you guys give us like a 1% discount if we pay within 15 days, or maybe 2% if we pay within 10 days. If that type of thing is done with your vendors, that would help drive your bottom line and help obviously reduce costs, reduce hard costs as well as soft costs. Then when you have more time, to work on value add activities, you can analyze and report on your business metrics more. So really, one of the common problems with a lot of businesses is that they spend so much time processing, it doesn't really leave too much time for them to go in and then figure out or analyze the information and analyze their data to figure out how is my organization doing and getting a really good pulse about the things going on. When there's more time for that, it allows people to get more detailed and dig into deeper and deeper issues to ultimately root out these issues and solve them. So that's a very difficult thing to do, to find the time to do when you and your team are bogged down with data entry. So kind of related to that is that a value add activity is to anything really that enhances departmental efficiency and drive the continuous close process. Now, the continuous close process is another one of those terms that's kind of been a bit of a buzzword it's been a little bit of a buzzword in the mid-20-teens, but now it's starting to become less of a buzzword and more of a norm. So we'll talk more about how these tools can help with your continuous close process. But ultimately, the continuous close process is really any process that allows you to be able to run a report mid-month and maybe run a financial mid-month and figure out kind of where your company is at as of that day. One of the problems, or the big problem these days, is that a lot of organizations need to wait till the end of the month to really figure out how they're performing, because they don't have time during the month to close out. Essentially, right now, a lot of organizations aren't able to close out every day, maybe like on a weekly basis even, but instead need to wait till the end of the month to really get accurate financials. So really, and one thing that you can do, one thing that you can work on is employee morale if you have more time for value add activities. Because maybe once in a while you'll have someone who really likes working with spreadsheets when it comes to moving data, or there's someone who just really digs it, and that's all well and good and everything. But I feel like the majority of people don't like transacting. They don't like data entry. Most of the time with finance people and accounting people and people who have dedicated a good portion of their lives to those practices, they want to do more analysis. They want to do more planning. They want to do more, analysis and planning. Yeah, they want to do more of those things. And I couldn't come up with a third option there. There's definitely more things that they'd want to do than that. But most of the time, those people who got into those fields of study, those fields of work, want to do more cerebral activities than just moving data. So essentially, I'm going to run through a couple of scenarios here. So this first objective is going to be where we're asking the question, how can artificial intelligence and machine learning help out this particular process, and whether a machine or a human is going to be better at it. I also have a second scenario, second objective, which kind of takes away the artificial intelligence portion, and the perspective is more heavy lifting, more process oriented. So let's talk about objective one here. So with objective one, this is the process of inputting AP bill data. So I've worked in AP positions before during the 20-teens, and really my perspective on it is that, or this isn't a perspective, this is just the truth. With AP bills, you have different formats for each vendor. Really, this requires learning. It requires intuition, because with AP bill data, it almost requires a little bit of a human learning element, because, like in that first part of the sentence there's a different format for each vendor. Every vendor will have different invoice formats. So you need to use some intuition to figure out, to read it, find the memo fields, find the bill number, find the bill date, stuff like that. But this was where but when I mentioned earlier, I said human intuition, but a little part of human intuition is starting to get baked into artificial intelligence and machine learning, because ultimately, even though those things aren't human, they can take on human-esque properties. So essentially what I'm going to do in the next couple objectives here is I'm going to pit two people against each other or two tools or two people who would be best suited for this job. And for those of you who don't know me, or those who don't know me incredibly well, I'm a little bit of a sci-fi nerd. I'm kind of a dork on that type of thing, so I like to bring up Star Trek references. I guess it's not exclusive to Star Trek, no franchise is off limits, but in this case, I am going to be comparing Captain Picard versus Lieutenant Commander Data. Probably my two most, in my opinion, my two most favorite characters in the Star Trek franchise. And for those of you who don't know who these people are, Captain Picard is a fellow who's played by Patrick Stewart, and Lieutenant Commander Data is essentially an android, a robot with human-like features. So I'm comparing these two because despite the fact that Picard's a full human, but Lieutenant Commander Data is a machine with some human elements, especially the way in which he looks and behaves to an extent. So let's think about what all happens when someone puts in an AP bill. So first of all, you have to type it in. So Picard, for the most part, although I'm pretty sure he can type fairly well, he's a relatively slow typist. He has a human brain, so he has a human brain capacity. So I had to do a little bit of Googling before this to figure out what exactly is the measurable processing speed, the maximum processing speed of a human. And the source I looked up, and I didn't cite it here, unfortunately, so please don't ding me for that. But the source I saw said there's a maximum processing speed of 60 bits per second in the human brain when it comes to processing speed. Now, I don't think this is the average. I think 60 bits per second is almost like running like 23 miles an hour as a human. Like, yeah, technically it's possible by the best runners, but most people are probably going to be measurably less than that. So it'd probably be a safe assumption to say most humans can process information between 30 and 60 bits per second. And then, of course, Captain Picard needs sleep and Earl Grey tea in order to function. So humans are kind of just limited in that regard when it comes to just pure processing and when it comes to things like that. So when it comes to inputting AP bill data, let's look at how Lieutenant Commander Data could do this. So once again, the common thing between them is they have some level of human intuition, right? Or human-like intuition, where they can read the invoice, they can figure out who it's for, figure out the bill number, figure out the date, and then figure out what the expenses are for. So in Data's case, Data is a very fast typist. I can't remember which episode it is, but it shows him typing away at a console, and he's just like flying. He would make Mavis Beacon jealous there. So, and then also, once again, I didn't cite the source directly here, but canonically, Commander Data has about a 100,000 terabyte storage capacity, which is absolutely massive. And his processing speed is 60 trillion bits per second, which is a trillion times greater than this figure right here. So most computers I would have to think most computers probably aren't at this level yet, seeing as this was a science fiction show. But regardless, computers are going to process information much faster than 60 bits per second. And machines typically don't need to sleep. Canonically, I can't remember if Data needs to like be charged or anything, but regardless, it doesn't need to sleep. So I don't know about you, but I would probably if I had to assign a job to input AP bills with some level of human intuition, I would give it to Data because the advantages that Data has is very fast data entry, and he knows how to follow directions, and he can do these tasks very quickly and in a repetitive nature. Now, but yet now put an AP automation tool in place of Commander Data, or there's a little vendor listing I'm going to be going to after this. But these AP automation vendors, these are augmented with AI, right? So they have artificial intelligence as part of the AP solution, where it reads the invoice, uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to figure out who the bill was from, who it's for, what the due date is, what the posting date is, everything like that. So it reads it really quickly, inputs it really quickly, and then sends it off to your accounting system for processing. So there's a lot of AI augmented AP solutions out on the market, but these are kind of what I consider to be the big three when it comes to ones that I've worked with, and also the ones that integrate directly in with Sage Intacct. So now I don't know if every single person on this webinar is one of my Sage Intacct clients or is currently using Sage Intacct, but these three are the big ones out on the Intacct marketplace that interface with Intacct. So these tools are pretty much the leaders when it comes to automating AP entry, which is one of the most heavy, when it comes to hours and effort and repetitiveness, that's really one of the most common business problems, and where people spend the most time putting in data manually is AP bills, because regardless of what type of organization you are, you have bills to pay, right? You have bills to pay, and everyone has vendors, whereas when we talk about maybe AR invoicing, accounts receivable invoicing, not every organization really bills people necessarily, or at least spends a lot of time inputting AR invoices manually. AP bills are definitely the largest time taker for businesses. I couldn't come up with a really great way to say that, so I apologize. All right, so we're just kind of whipping through here. So the second objective is importing data from an external source. It can be any source. It could be a database. It could be a text file. It could be another software that you're using. But taking that data and importing it into your ERP system. So you might say, well, Wes, isn't that really similar to what you were doing before with AP? It's still data migration. Well, the main difference between something that's like raw data from an external source is that you're typically dealing with the same formats every time. Whereas with AP bills, every vendor, like I said, every vendor has a different format. Everyone has a different layout of what their information looks like. And more than that is typically when you receive invoices, it's an image. It's something that you need to look at and analyze. Whereas when you pull data from an external source, you're typically dealing with raw data that's already in like a text or a SQL or a CSV format. So this type of process is really more repetitive and heavy lifting. You can kind of think of this as like maybe like a payroll journal entry import, or you can think of it as like a credit card import, or let's say your organization is adding theoretically 100,000 new records every single day. Put yourself in the shoes of a big e-commerce organization, or an organization that does a lot of online sales. You're adding tons of customers all the time. So the process of moving that data from one system into another, if you're doing that manually, that's going to take a long time. But overall, this type of process where you're just importing data from an external source, sometimes a little intuition is nice to have, but for the most part, these type of tasks are more just popping things into templates, running formulas, doing the same thing every time. So I'm not going to be using I was tempted to use another sci-fi franchise for my references here, but really I figured this would be a bit more real life. So, and plus also bearing in mind that not everyone is a nerd like me. But so who would be best suited for this type of job? So the contenders are a staffer with a spreadsheet, an accounting staffer specifically, or our MainerLink integration tool, because I'd like kind of a little bit of a self-plug here, and I'm going to throw our little logo right there. Okay, so for this job, let's talk about let's go ahead and stack the stats against the staffer versus the integration tool. So I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the staffer here. So even on my best days where I get like 9 hours of sleep and I'm caffeinated with like 2,000 milligrams of caffeine, my top speed was still relatively low, and I was limited by keystrokes, mouse clicks, and Excel. And I don't know for those of you who have done a lot of work with Excel and formulas, but there comes a point where if you don't structure your formulas just right, your Excel file will just take forever to calculate, or it'll crash, things like that. So even you're limited by more things than just the human element when you're working with spreadsheets. You're also limited by Excel, because Excel just typically is not that powerful. And for the most part, staffers will only work during daylight hours, during the weekend. And then the human process, because maybe this is a month-end process where it's absolutely critical, you have to get it done by a certain time, it can lead to rushed performance, right? So if if you give the hurry up to someone to say, hey, you need to get this done before 3 o'clock, or else we can't generate financials, or we're going to be here until like 8 o'clock at night. So that might lead to inaccurate imports or inaccurate archiving and record keeping, right? So it's like, let's say you're using a template to import data with a spreadsheet, and you're trying to figure out, oh, hey, I need to dig into the import template, the data from this time frame. I need to do some error checking on it. Well, it turns out the person who was doing the processing didn't save a copy of it correctly, or overwrote an old copy and saved over that one then. So it's like you just lose that data. You don't have that solid archive to go make inquiries with. But with the Mainerlink integration tool with underlying databases built in, really the only limitation is computer hardware. And like we talked about earlier, computers, even the most primitive of computers, even like a dollar store calculator, has many times more computational power than a human does. So if you're running any type of server with a processor in it, it's going to have a much higher top processing speed than a human with Excel. And with an integration tool, excuse me, it can be scheduled to run whenever you want, at 2 a.m. every day, even on weekends and holidays. You know, when I worked with spreadsheets, sometimes I'd work a little bit after hours to get the job done, whatever was necessary. But I typically never imported things at 2 a.m. But the integration tool, it can do that every single day. And then and once again, the integration tool is the Mainerlink integration tool. It's configurable by us, and we can use an underlying database, or we can choose not to. We can structure the data in any way we want. But one of the best ways, the best practice in my mind, is to employ like a structured SQL database where you can dump all of your records, and then when those records import successfully, they get marked as imported, and if they didn't go in correctly, then on each row say what the error was. So I did mention this earlier, but let's put ourselves in the position of that person. Let's just say Amazon, right? Let's just say someone at Amazon needs to take a spreadsheet with 500,000 records, take it from one system and import it into another system. Well, let's say all but like 1% imported. So the process to figure out which ones imported and which ones didn't is that you need to run a listing of all the newly added records inside the new system, send it out to Excel, do a VLOOKUP to compare the two values to figure out which ones made it in, which ones didn't. Now, that's going to pretty much, first of all, it's going to take forever for, if it does calculate, it's going to take forever for those formulas to evaluate inside of Excel, and it could very well just crash your file. But with the integration tool, with every record that's imported successfully, it writes back to the underlying data table to say, oh, you see this range of records, this imported successfully, this one imported successfully, but this one didn't, and here's the reason why. So when you use integration tools and underlying databases as opposed to spreadsheets, you're going to have a lot better time with figuring out what went wrong when data doesn't get imported. So who would win in this contest then? Well, I'm obviously biased, but I would have to say, you know what? I probably would go for the integration tool that works at 2 a.m. every day to import the data. So once again, that's a very biased belief, but also even if I wasn't biased, I feel like that would be the way to go as well. So after this presentation, you may be interested in using smart technologies, or maybe even using your existing technology I don't think more smartly is the correct way to say it. So just using your, what? Efficient. Okay, so yeah, using your existing technology in a more efficient manner. So once again, I'm going to state my name and email here. You can email me directly, but one thing you might want to do, just so that we can get it in our queue and get it routed to the correct people, is send requests off to support@MainerSolutions.com. Maybe, like I said, this is a little bit of a departure from my typical process where I do like a deep dive technical session. But if you're interested in receiving a demo of any of these AP automation tools, or seeing, excuse me, or seeing a demo of our Mainerlink integration tool, just send us a note and say, hey, I saw a webinar, I saw Wes's webinar on this, and I'd be interested in learning more. There's really no obligation at all to get a demo set up for you to exercise the thought. So that's pretty much it when it came to my presentation that I have. Well, if you have any questions, you're always free to email the support line at support@MainerSolutions.com. Any questions about Intact or any of the other products or services that we offer are certainly welcomed. Have a fantastic rest of your day and a fantastic rest of your week.